What has been the number one sort of challenge that you see facing India as an asset class?
Right. So it changes in time. So I think back then in 2008, 2009, there were, India actually attracted quite a bit of overseas capital into Asia. And there were hope that Asia could be as good as China, if not better. But I think obviously there were a lot of disappointment due to various issues, currency, etc. So nowadays, in the last 2-3 years, it's actually a lot more difficult to fundraise for Indian GPs. And I think the challenge is institutional investors only have very limited allocation into Asia. And when they think about Asia, oftentimes China is always comes up first. Right? So that's the challenges and disappointment that we face is when we help the Indian GPs to raise money.
Some of these currency issues are not in the fund manager's control. That's something that the markets decide. But to the extent something is in their control, what is it that the fund managers could be doing better to make their case?
Well, they were saying that, it's actually quite an interesting question because a lot of people, LP-wise, were saying Indian GPs are oftentimes overly optimistic about their projections, about the growth, about how they can handle the promoter, the management team, etc.
That's a good thing, right? We're optimistic people.
Indeed. But I think that also, LPs actually keep track of those, as keep track of the old historical meeting notes. And when they compare to, the last meeting, it didn't turn out to be exactly that. So they would wonder, what happened. And more than often, I think they're a bit over-optimistic.
Mm. Does that mean that the LPs make a judgment call on GP's inability to foresee the future?
So it's a combination, and it's a combination of GP individually, and also it's a combination of LP allocation. And again, going back to my point earlier, I would, as in, let's say US foundations, for example, right? I may only have 2 bullets each year to invest in Asia. So if one goes to China, where's the other one going to go? It could be India, it could be Southeast Asia, it could be Japan, Korea, whatever, right? And I think, just looking at very high-level numbers, India hasn't generated the numbers that people were hoping for. Of course, there are a couple of GPs that have performed really well, and obviously those are hard to get into sometimes. But besides those ones, they sort of, say, look, if I can generate returns that are similar in, let's say, Japan or Korea, and they're more developed market, safer bet, why should I take that risk? And why should I take the extra 6 hours flight to India? And that's not even it's not even a joke because distance does matter for them. India is just so far for, let's say, a US LPs to think, what it's like here.
Sorry, so just run that by. So when a USA, you said a foundation or endowment,
Sure.
right, is making an allocation, is it to a country, is it to the asset class, is it to private equity or venture capital, and within that, Asian private equity? Is that how it works? And then they're making the call based on how Indian managers have performed, or how India as a GDP is going? I mean,
Sure.
is it past performance based?
It is. So obviously each LPs are very different, but roughly speaking, they look at it from a macro picture. Then they would say, yes, I would do Asia. Then Asia, they would very likely gonna map each single country, and they would pick 3-5 best managers in each of the countries, and then they would actually put it compare apple to apple, and that's not fair in a way. But people do that now, and we even seeing people are comparing China, Japan, Korea, Indian funds to US funds. And when you compare that, the DPI is going to not look very good because US has been generating a lot of DPIs, right? So that's an extra challenge for Asian GPs in general, I guess emerging Asian GPs.
And where do they get that data from? Because one of the challenges that we've been discussing at this conclave is that the lack of standardization of performance data. So when there is an LP sitting somewhere in the US, endowment, pension, whatever, how do they even get the information they need to be able to make that call?
That's a very good point. I think there's a big gap in the data. There are a couple of consultants that provide, reports. We believe those reports are somewhat biased because if you are performing very well as a GP, of course I'm going to submit those data to you. But if I'm not performing too well, I'll skip this quarter, right?
So it's survivor bias.
Exactly. There are also other, data provider that somehow have retrieved the data from public sources, U.S. Public pensions website, etc. They are a source, but it's not a complete picture, I would say.
So is that something that you've given feedback for the industry to address?
Absolutely, and I think, but it's a hard question, and I think there are people working really hard to improve that. But at the end of the day, it is at the GP discretion to give you those data or not.
So going forward, are you optimistic on Indian fundraising?
I am, and for a couple of reasons. I think I actually believe this is the decade for India, and we have seen a significant growth in China, and we have seen the shift starting to happen where people have now have a pretty mature portfolio in China. They are now starting to look elsewhere. Where are they going to find that similar sort of alpha? And if you think about Asia, India is as big as China, and it should be a powerhouse, right? And so, we are very hopeful, and one of the purpose for me being here is actually trying to find good quality managers.
And how do you do that? How do you find the quality managers? I mean, do you just speak to people, or do you have a data set that you first sift through to then find people?
We are just like an LPs. So we'll reach out to every single GPs that we can, and then we have meetings, we have our assessment, and obviously, as a placement agent, then there's a two-way process. They have to like us, we have to like them, and that's how it works.